Thank you very much. It is hard to figure out how to introduce someone who's this old, has been married that many years, and actually has been involved in the pro-life movement since January 22nd, 1973. So that was a good summary, thank you. But I do want to say, while I'm involved now and have been really full-time involved primarily with Heartbeat International since 1993, when I became president of Heartbeat International. And I held that office for 23 years. And Heartbeat is the big pregnancy center group that you'll hear more about in the slide presentation as we go along. But before that, when God first tapped me on January 22nd, 1973, and I bet that date rings a bell. At least it's a date in history that all of you young people have heard about. It was one of those dates for me, like everyone knows where you were, if you were alive at that point, on the day that President John F. Kennedy was killed. Everybody knows where you were on September 11th, right? I know where I was on January 22nd, 1973. It was one of those astounding moments in history where everything stopped, and I said, how could this be happening in my country? And I grew up in the 50s and early 60s when we still had to memorize things like the preamble to the Constitution, and we knew that we were endowed with inalienable rights, like the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And all of this that was happening, all of a sudden, it seemed to me, on January 22nd, couldn't be happening. So it was like St. Paul, who got knocked off his horse, in my mind, and changed my life dramatically, and in very, very wonderful ways as well, which I don't have time to tell you today. But one of the things I did want to share is that Cleveland holds a near and dear place in my heart because I was born in Cleveland. I grew up in Lancaster and then Columbus, Ohio, where Heartbeat International is currently located. But it was really Cleveland that, in a sense, started my journey. Why was I so shocked on January 22nd, 1973? Cleveland Right to Life and other pro-life groups had already been formed to try to stop the legalization of abortion all over the country, state by state. And Cleveland was passing out Cleveland Right to Life, Dr. Wilkie's Life or Death brochure. How many of you remember that Life or Death brochure? A few of us old-timers here. And the Knights of Columbus, Diary of an Unborn Child. Do we have any Knights of Columbus here in the room? Thank you for all you have always done for the pro-life movement. And that Diary of the Unborn Child, and now ultrasounds, hundreds of ultrasounds in our pregnancy centers around the country. But those pioneering pieces and the pioneering work of Cleveland Right to Life touched my sister. She sent those pieces to me. So by the time January 22nd came around, I knew that something was wrong. And so I thank Cleveland Right to Life for that. And it's good to be back. This is the first time I've ever spoken, really, in Cleveland, and particularly for Cleveland Right to Life. So it's great to be here. And I do want to introduce, I'm no longer the president of Heartbeat International, I'm chairman of the board, but our president is here, Jarrell Godsey. Want to stand up and say hi? Jarrell Godsey from Heartbeat. He didn't come just to hear me talk. He has to hear me talk an awful lot. But he came partly for that reason and to connect with Alex van Vuren from the Netherlands, one of the groups that we connect with all over Europe, and we met in Russia and all over the world. So Alex, great to have you here, and so many also guests from other countries. It's wonderful to know that God's calling us all over the world, right? All right, well, I want to share with you today the fact that you have allies in the pregnancy help movement. Life-affirming pregnancy help is a key to bringing America back to life. So when Molly invited me to speak to the conference, she said, well, what do you want the topic of your presentation to be? And I said, wow, I love your theme, bringing America back to life. And guess what? That's our mission as well at Heartbeat International. So I want to share with you that you have allies that have the same goal, And that in fact, we are helping to bring America back to life simply by virtue of what we do in pregnancy help. Now, let's see, green is supposed to advance the slide. Help me back there. I think I'm supposed to be, there we go. Okay, our mission at Heartbeat International is to reach and rescue as many lives as possible around the world through an effective network of life-affirming pregnancy help to renew communities for life. Why do we do what we do? Yes, we are saving, or in fact, we make it clear, mothers are saving their babies in pregnancy help centers all over the world every day. God is moving those mothers. We're simply instruments in that process. But Heartbeat's job as Heartbeat International, as a teaching training organization, is to make sure that those pregnancy centers are as effective as they possibly can be with all the right tools and training and equipment to do what they do. But we're doing it to help renew communities for life. And, you know, one of the things I learned early on in doing this work, and for those of you who got involved real early on, there were no conferences, really. There were no training manuals. Remember, I said we only had 2 pro-life brochures. We had to do everything just by jumping in and doing it. So it was very easy for us to realize that our successes were not coming from ourselves because we had no idea what we were doing. we didn't know. And so we had to realize the fruit that is coming from this work is because God is working through us. And in fact, we look around and say, God, what are you doing? What fruit are you bringing up here? What is happening because you are moving? And then we try to get on his plan. That's a very good way to develop a strategic plan. You know, you don't just say, okay, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's going to cost exactly this much money, and we're going to have it done by these dates, because as you all know, usually that doesn't happen, even when you write it down so beautifully. But what is God doing? How is the fruit being born? How is it coming to be? God's doing that. Get on board with him. And that's what we realized with pregnancy help, that God was calling people all over the world to do this work. The work that they were doing was renewing communities for life. Now, how was it happening? Hey, we're going to get on that plan and we're going to go with it. And that's what we did. And that's what we do. Let me explain to you how we do it and some of the fruit. Okay, for some reason, this is not. One more, next slide, please. There we go. Pregnancy help comes in many shapes and sizes and is ethnically diverse. Because people are listening on the radio and don't have the slides, I am going to be reading a little bit as we go along. You can see that pregnancy help centers can be medical, as the one at the bottom with the ultrasound. You probably all know about those. We have mobile units all over the United States as well. We have brick and mortar, all right, as you see at the top. We have freestanding pregnancy help centers, clinics, resource centers, maternity homes, nonprofit adoption agencies that are all part of our network. You see up at the top left, obviously, a lot of support for the girls and women whose babies are saved in pregnancy centers. That's not the end of the story when the mother says, yes, I'm going to continue the pregnancy. We need to come along with a tremendous amount of help and support in parenting classes, single mom support programs, maternity homes sometimes, and residential care facilities, all kinds of help. Down at the bottom left, you see a picture of one of the initiatives specifically. Heartbeat has a hard enough time keeping track of what the Holy Spirit's doing all over the world and getting behind and helping to assist the people that are being raised up to do this work. But sometimes we've been involved in actually proactively planting pregnancy centers. And this one on the left, which was founded and staffed almost entirely by the Latino community in Miami. There were 26 abortion clinics, not one pregnancy center with an ultrasound in the whole Miami area. And now this group is doing gangbusters here. That is Heartbeat of Miami down there. And remember that picture, because I want to mention it a little bit later as we continue in the slide presentation. Okay, next slide, please. For some reason, this is not, there we go. Not only do we look diverse in being ethnically diverse and in terms of what our service units look like, but we are diverse in the actual services themselves. Like Right to Life, we are primarily community and volunteer based, but we are specifically geared to helping those struggling with unplanned or unintended pregnancies. These services fall into the kind of range of crisis intervention, when women first think they may be pregnant or in fact find out that they are pregnant. There's often a crisis. What am I going to do? I can't carry this baby. I can't continue this pregnancy. That is our crisis intervention services. Often we work on that with hotlines, our medical and non-medical pregnancy help centers, support services during the pregnancy and beyond. You saw some pictures of that in the previous slide. Our prevention services, many centers have gotten into prevention as well if they have a more comprehensive model. How do we help young people avoid getting pregnant? Well, the answer is chastity education and training. Many of our centers are big in that. Thank you. And of course, we realized early on we had to provide also reconciliation and healing, because the people that were coming to us had many wounds that needed to be healed in order for them sometimes even to make a decision for life, but certainly to be the mothers and the parents that God intended them to be. So the post-abortion, particularly after abortion, but also healing from abuse as well, we provide in our pregnancy help centers. We're motivated by faith and or humanitarianism, and if you are interested in my book, I trace the beginnings of the pregnancy help movement. Interestingly, I loved hearing what Josh Mendel had to say. One of our founders of Heartbeat International was actually a German woman, survivor of Nazi Germany. All of her family was killed in World War II, except for her sister, and she made it out by masquerading as a Red Cross nurse. She ended up eventually in England and then the United States, where she became one of the founders of Heartbeat International. And one of her most famous quotes is, "If we're not against abortion, we're against our own survival." So we are motivated by faith and or humanitarianism. She was one of those who felt that our motive had to be primarily humanitarian. And certainly there is a basis of humanitarianism in everything that we do. But as God has continued to work with us, it's become clearer and clearer that we need to be, I believe, much more explicit about the faith-based nature of what we do. And you'll see that as the slides continue as well. And of course, within the centers, we represent a culture that is both pro-life and pro-family. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We serve diverse needs, women and girls from all walks of life, but many of them are survivors of the sexual and cultural revolution of the last 50 years, including unmarried pregnant girls and women, often abandoned by the father of their child, some from generations of fatherlessness, sexually active single females, often with sexually transmitted infections and diseases, often with a history of multiple sexual partners, sexual trauma, previous abortions, women wanting to be pregnant but often with no interest in a father for their child or unequipped for motherhood, boys and men confused by their manhood. This is a description of a vast number of people in the United States today and around the world who are coming into our doors in the pregnancy help centers, and that we're ministering to in our support and healing programs as well, and that we're trying to reach ahead of time with our chastity education. Next slide, please. For some reason this, okay. Yearly numbers, just to give you an idea, and this is my last slide of kind of introduction of what we do. Then we're going to get into, I promised last night when I was sharing with a small group here, we're going to be really talking about the good news. The good news, and I hope it's very encouraging to you. You know, what pregnancy help is doing individually, with individuals and families, simply by virtue of what we do every day in pregnancy centers, what pregnancy centers can do intentionally to make their communities communities of life, and then finally, even, how pregnancy centers are helping turn abortion clinics into places of life again. So those are the three things I'm going to be sharing. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background and some numbers here as to what we're talking about in terms of the Heartbeat Network. Heartbeat's option line, which you see mentioned there first, 1-800-712-HELP, or optionline.org. I discovered last night that many of you have never heard of Option Line. You need to, Father Pavone says everyone needs to memorize this number, have it in your cell phone, optionline.org. You can find over 2,000 pregnancy centers and maternity homes that are involved in our work that Heartbeat International connects 250,000 calls, emails, instant messages, and live chats every year. Last year it was over 250,000, 267 or 70,000, connects these callers and women in need to the local pregnancy help center. Because we believe the best alternative to abortion is another person. Get that person into a local pregnancy center where we can stand behind her and provide her help and hope. Option Line, which was founded, I think, about 12 or 13 years ago, has helped over 2.6 million people now and gotten them in contact with help in their local communities. So that's a number that you need to know. 250,000 and more every year that we are connecting to local centers. 160,000 abortion vulnerable women in our centers make life-affirming choices in the faith of an unexpected pregnancy every year. That is one baby every 4 minutes around the clock, simply by what we can estimate and a good educated guess with some of the statistics that we have. We're getting better at following those statistics, but this is our best estimate around the clock of what is happening just in the Heartbeat International Network in the United States. That is 630,000 plus clients served every year here in our country, and over 29,000 volunteers are working at any one point in time bringing America back to life through the work of the pregnancy center. So that is exciting. That is very encouraging. Sometimes you feel alone in this work, but you're not alone. You know, many, many more people are having the same desire of their heart and goal to bring America back to life. You see at the bottom there a map of the location of what we estimate 2,500 pregnancy help locations in the United States. By the way, in the state of Ohio, there are 111 pregnancy help locations, 90 of whom are directly affiliated with Heartbeat International, all of whom are listed on our option line. So Ohio is doing great in providing that kind of help and support. Okay, next slide, please. If we can get to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to start into, next slide. That's me. Oh, here we go. Now, by virtue of what we do, simply by what we do in daily pregnancy centers, how is this transforming America for life? All right, babies are saved. First thing is babies are saved. And when babies are saved, a woman at risk for abortion decides to carry her baby to term. Remember, the mother saves her baby. Babies represent the most powerful example of a positive outcome, of life, new life. The ultrasound can even show us pictures of that baby and the new life in the womb, even before the baby's born. So every life changes the world. Next slide, please. A baby then brings the mother back to life. And how many times do we hear in pregnancy centers the last comment, "My baby saved me"? All right, when the mother begins to have those strong maternal instincts and realizes this is my baby and I need to save my baby's life, the mother changes. Her priorities change. And many, many women have rejected very unhealthy lifestyles in order to carry their responsibilities as a mother, with the help and support, of course, of lots of people in pregnancy center work. It's a beautiful thing to see, and I'm going to give you some examples of that in a minute, some real life stories. Next slide, please. A baby brings a family to life. A baby and mother are the simplest definition of a family, but the birth of the baby creates more likelihood that the father and mother may get married and form a nuclear family. And this is happening in our pregnancy centers. Many pregnancy centers have started fathership programs, and the young men come in and they learn what it means to be a father. And we are seeing marriages come out of our pregnancy centers, and it's beautiful. In addition, the baby may create an extended family, potentially grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. This is bringing America back to life. Let's look at our next slide, please. The family brings community and a future to life. It's a lineage. The birth of the child is an extension of a lineage of both mom and dad's family, affecting generations to come. Didn't Josh Mandel's story really show that? Had his grandmother not survived, had his grandfather not survived Auschwitz, we wouldn't have Josh Mandel. And what a tremendous young man and leader for our state and hopefully for our country. So a child brings life not only in the birth of that child, but to the mother, hopefully to the family. The family brings that to community, and that brings the future to life. And only families can replicate families. Let's continue. I want to give you some actual stories that illustrate this. In the pregnancy help movement, we see these stories all the time, and it is so encouraging. And even though I don't work anymore in a pregnancy center, I get to hear many of these stories because Heartbeat, every year, at least once, sometimes twice a year, we take a group of moms and babies whose lives have been saved in pregnancy centers, sometimes with the husbands, sometimes with the extended family. They come with us to Washington, D.C. to meet their legislators and to tell them that pregnancy centers are good for America. All right, we are renewing local communities at no cost to the taxpayer. And so I get to hear their stories and get to know them at that time. Here, this is just recently, this past January, I chose 2 moms from Ohio to show you what some of the wonderful things that are happening. This is Michaela and her daughter Ariane, and they are meeting here with in one of the legislative offices for the state of Ohio. And Michaela is telling her story. Now, Michaela, it's a beautiful story. She started looking for help when she and her boyfriend were in shock, discovered they were pregnant. She found a pregnancy center, Elizabeth's New Life Center in Dayton, Ohio. And they did an ultrasound for her. And she said, I could hear my baby's heartbeat so strong. And she said, it made me start to love my baby. And then she said, they gave me a packet of information with all the help that they could provide. But when she left that center, now she didn't know this, her person that's been mentoring her along the way told me the other day, Meg, she said she didn't know. We started praying for her the minute she left that office. We knew she was under tremendous pressure, and she was bathed in prayer for the entire time. She showed up at an abortion clinic with her boyfriend the following week, and they actually paid their down payment for the abortion, an abortion clinic in Kettering, Ohio. And Michaela, at the very end of the interview, because I think of the feeling she was having in the ultrasound, said to the receptionist at the abortion clinic, what happens to my baby after the abortion? The receptionist just said, oh, they throw it in the trash. And Michaela said, I knew my baby was worth more than that. And when she got home and struggled with that, she knew that she could not follow through with the abortion. She called, she had courage, she wanted her money back. They wouldn't give it to her, but she said, that's okay. And she knew that the pregnancy center could help her, went back, started into their parenting classes, parenting programs. They have taken her under their wing and helped her complete school. When she lost her job, actually, is through no fault of her own, the pregnancy center actually recently offered her a job. And so Michaela and Ariane are just doing beautifully. Let's go to the next slide. This is the Pablo family. Yeah, It's a beautiful story. This is the Pablo family, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't get their names wrong. They're just a beautiful, beautiful family. They're from the Baltimore, Maryland area. Went with us to Babies Go to Congress. This is them actually standing in one of the congressional halls. And Victoria, who's the mother, when she was 15, she found out that she was pregnant. Her now husband, Christian, on the right, was the father of the child. Both of their families were very goal-oriented, very conservative, very religious. They were the good kids, and they really felt that their only alternative was abortion. They ended up, praise be to God, at the Bowie Crofton Pregnancy Center in Maryland, where they had an ultrasound. They immediately knew that they could not proceed with the abortion. But their parents were still very, very pro-abortion. So they were tremendously courageous in continuing that pregnancy when she was only 15. A few years later, they did get married. They were together the entire time, waiting. The family was waiting, helping them finish school, hoping and praying that actually they were meant for each other. And they were, and they eventually got married, had their second daughter, Mia. And the reason that the pregnancy center is back, by the way, also, Victoria became a legal, what do you call it, a legal assistant? Oh, a paralegal. Victoria's a paralegal, and her husband, Christian, is an engineer. They did all that while they were parenting their beautiful little Christiana, and then Mia came along. But anyway, they got back in touch with the center, and they attribute the fact that they were able to continue that pregnancy and do finish school to the support of that pregnancy center through the years. But what happened was Christiana, who knew her history, that her life was first observed in the ultrasound at that pregnancy center, for her confirmation preparation, she wanted to visit the pregnancy center and tell everybody about her story. And so they came back and let everybody know what the rest of the story. And it's an example of how we see that a life decision affects generations and will affect generations to come. Builds family. Family builds community. We are changing the world. Next slide, please. Just another quick story. This is Loretha and Jeremiah, one of my favorite stories. Loretha was 40. Loretha here is at the right with her baby Jeremiah, and down at the bottom. And then you see them also with Alveda King. They were so excited to come to Babies Go to Congress to meet Alveda King, niece of Martin Luther King Jr., who is also a former Heartbeat International board member. What a moment for them. But Loretha was 40. Got pregnant through a liaison at work, which was that kind of fraternization was prohibited, forbidden at work. She already had 3 children, 2 daughters who were almost ready to graduate from high school, were counting on going to college, and a son who was about 9 years old. She felt she had no other choice but abortion, but she ended up in a pregnancy center. And praise be to God, they didn't even have an ultrasound. But when she started learning about the development of her baby and felt the love of that center, she knew she couldn't go through with the abortion. Well, her family, yes, praise God, her family actually rejected her totally. The 2 older daughters were furious at her. Mom, you bring another child into this family. You are going to be supporting our college education. We won't be able to go to school. This can't happen. Everybody was furious. Her mother was furious at her. She ended up actually homeless. Her children went and stayed with their grandmother, and she ended up losing her job, and she was homeless. The pregnancy center stood behind her, helped her through that, got her a place to live, helped the family eventually reconcile. And of course, when Jeremiah was born, I wrote down here, she told me, she said, we named him Jeremiah because you probably all know what Jeremiah means. Wait a minute, I wrote it down, and here it is. No, I didn't write it down. It means chosen by the Lord, I believe. And so she said, we named him Jeremiah. And of course, once the baby's born, the family is ecstatic, about this beautiful baby in the family. And the older daughters are ecstatic. The family's been brought together again. But one of the really neat things was that her son, who by that time was 10 or 11, wrote a letter to President Obama, which she brought, and we made sure got delivered to the White House, telling him what a horrible policy abortion was. And if it hadn't been, for pro-life centers, he would not have this beautiful brother. Now, you tell me that any one of those children in that family will ever have an abortion, and I don't believe it. I think this baby not only saved, his life was saved, his mother's life was saved, and I believe their family was saved for generations because of one choice for life. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The last story that I have to share, last but not least, I love Whitney and her story. This is a girl from Columbus, Ohio. As I mentioned, I chose 2 from Ohio. And Whitney, you see her with her little boy, and I want to make sure I get his name right because I have not met her little baby. Joshua Michael is his name. She got pregnant. She was the good girl in college, had always done everything right, had a very strong evangelical Christian family. Her mother had actually volunteered at the local pregnancy center, but when she got pregnant, she thought she had to have an abortion to save her family from the shame. And this happens all the time. We see daughters of pastors in our pregnancy centers. And so anyway, she made the abortion appointment, but one of her friends said, the day before the appointment on Saturday, please just come with me, please, to the pregnancy center just to talk to one person. She agreed to do that. At the pregnancy center, she got an ultrasound, of course. She started loving her baby even more. And she eventually chose an adoption for her little boy. And by the way, some of these stories, not all of them that I've chosen, are on the Heartbeat International website, heartbeatinternational.org. And it's under Lives Saved. You'll see a choice for Lives Saved. But she said once her baby was born, she felt so much in love with him that she knew for sure that she could make a loving choice for him, and that adoption was that loving choice. It's a beautiful story. Well, this is her little boy. She had an open adoption. She does occasionally see Joshua Michael, and a few years later, she met her husband, James. His name is James. Down there is their wedding, and her little son that she placed for adoption was the ring bearer in her wedding. So that was a really neat story. And I met her actually after that picture was taken, and we got to be friends, and she invited me to the baby shower when she and her husband James had their first son, whom they named James III. Their last name is Wall. So her husband was James Wall II, and her son over here on the right with his grandmother is James Wall III. You can see, I know not everybody is from Ohio, but they're all Ohio State fans. The O-H-I-O, that's what they're doing. And his first little onesie was an Ohio State onesie. So this is James Wall III. Now, that's not even the best part of the story in my mind, because when I went to the baby shower for James Wall III, I got to meet a lovely woman, and they introduced me to this lady, and then later, Whitney just pulled me aside. She said, I want to tell you about that lady, because she said, she's the mother of my little boy. This is the adoptive mother. And she said, guess what happened? She said, I decided that I thought adoption was such a beautiful choice, and somebody told me that a lot of women at the women's penitentiary were pregnant. So she said, I asked if I could go and talk to them about adoption because it's such a wonderful choice. So she said, I've been going there and talking to them from time to time. And she said one of the girls in prison decided that she wanted to think about and inquire about an adoption. So she went to an adoption agency. They matched her up with a family. She chose the family that would adopt her little girl, and guess who the family was that she chose? The same family that had adopted Whitney's little son. And so Whitney not only allowed that family to have a son, she was instrumental in helping them to also have their daughter. So now you see the kind of stories we know that show you that just by virtue of our work, we are affecting babies, women, families, communities, changing the culture for generations. So be encouraged. It's wonderful work that's happening. I just have a few more minutes, and I do have quite a few slides that I'm going to go through real quickly. The second point I wanted to make is that pregnancy centers can intentionally work to renew their communities for life and bring America back to life. This slide, for those of you who are listening on the radio, has the Pregnancy Help Ministry in the middle. And then the little bubbles around are the women and men in need. We've already talked about them. The media, the business community, the churches, the legislators, the medical community, the social service community, and the schools. These are just some of the influencers in a local community. Pregnancy centers, by virtue of what they do, they talk to the media. They invite the business community to become sponsors and donors and come to their banquets and hear their stories. They go into the churches to share their stories. On Sanctity of Human Life Sunday and at other times, they can take their babies to their local legislators, like we do at Babies Go to Congress, and say, look what's happening in your community. The medical community, if they're a medical center particularly, they can impact the medical community. Let me just tell you the story. I mentioned Elizabeth's New Life Center in Dayton. Their medical director of the pro-life pregnancy center group there in Dayton was asked to give a presentation at the Grand Rounds, I believe it's called, at the biggest hospital there in Dayton. Now that is quite an honor. All of the medical personnel are there, and she was asked to give a presentation. So we can impact the medical community as well, a pregnancy center can. The social services community, the counselors, the schools, presentations in the schools on parenthood, on motherhood, on abortion, on adoption, on chastity. Centers are doing it all over the country. So they can intentionally change their communities for life and bring America back to life. Let's look at the next slide. The intentional impact by just one pregnancy help center, in their own words, let's go to that slide, the next one please. You can't see this, but when we ask centers to bring their babies to Congress, and when they're going to be meeting with their representative, we say, put on one page for your representative the community impact that your center has. And let me just go over here because I can read it better. I'm only going to read you a few things. In their community, teen pregnancies have declined more than 24% since 2000. The volunteers have invested more than 440,716 service hours, valued at $7.9 million in donations. They have ensured healthy birth weight babies through their nutrition education program. In the 13 years of this pregnancy center's service in Southwest Missouri, 100% of the participating clients have avoided low birth weight babies and preterm birth. You know, the whole state of Ohio is involved in a massive effort to reduce low infant birth rates and infant mortality. A pregnancy center can be key to that as well. This center, the community ended up with 10 or 12 red flags that they asked everyone in the community to work toward. The pregnancy center adopted this, and in their work, they've been reducing child abuse and neglect, communicable diseases, domestic violence, homeless children and adolescents, access to health care, childhood nutrition, smoking during pregnancy, single parents in financial distress, children in poverty, and illegal drug use. And at the bottom, it says collaborations, partnering with more than 50 community organizations, universities, schools, social service organizations, and foundations to provide essential client care. Now, don't you think that the contact that pregnancy center has with the movers and shakers in that community is renewing America for life? I certainly do, and you can see it in cases like that. Okay, let's hurry on. The last point is that pregnancy centers are even involved in transforming abortion clinics from places of death to places of life. And this is, again, spontaneous. This was not our strategic plan. You know, we didn't write it down. We saw what God was doing. And as we share what God is doing, more people realize that God is calling them to do the same. National Memorial for the Unborn in Chattanooga. This has been around for a long time. That was the original abortion clinic on the left. Next door to that abortion clinic was AAA Pregnancy Services, one of the Heartbeat International affiliates in Chattanooga. And eventually that center closed. I wish I could tell you the long story of prayer mainly prayer that resulted in the closing of that abortion clinic. The final step was getting church youth groups marching around that clinic almost every day, like until the walls of Jericho fell down, you know. And eventually, that abortion clinic closed. Unfortunately, I believe, although it had to be God's plan, the abortionist tried to open another clinic, but she ended up with breast cancer and died. And so that clinic has never been reinstituted. No clinic has been reinstituted in Chattanooga. And the whole place has been turned into the National Memorial for the Unborn, which is an absolute beautiful place if you've never seen it. How many have you seen the National Memorial for the Unborn? Beautiful place. And by the way, this mission of centers to bring reconciliation and healing, it is a beautiful one. And I want to say to anyone here who has had an abortion or been involved in an abortion, and you know, statistics would tell us that in any group of Christian women, 1 out of 4 has been involved in an abortion. And that goes for the men as well. So I'm positive that there are people here in this room who have had abortions. I know you know this. I want to assure you even more that God is ready to heal you at any point. He's already forgiven you, because we know your feeling of regret and remorse. And that goes for anyone who's been involved in an abortion. And it's beautiful to see how much post-abortion healing and recovery is becoming much more available, and places like the National Memorial for the Unborn. I just want to say, I'm going to show you a couple more pictures of other centers that have done the same. But 2 of the ones that I have chosen, I noticed in their materials, they've chosen as their one even as their name, Isaiah 61. Okay, and this is what Isaiah 61 says. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the afflicted, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives, release to the prisoners, to announce a year of favor from the Lord and a day of vindication by our God, to comfort all who mourn, to place on those who mourn in Zion a diadem instead of ashes, beauty instead of ashes, to give them oil of gladness instead of mourning, a glorious mantle instead of a faint spirit. And under restoration, it says, they will be oaks of justice, the planting of the Lord to show his glory. They shall rebuild the ancient ruins. Talk about rebuilding America. These people who have been healed and restored, this says, they shall rebuild the ancient ruins. The former waste they shall raise up and restore the desolate cities, devastations of generation upon generation. So we have hope. We know the Lord is doing it. And let me show you a couple more pictures that are very, very encouraging here. In Toledo, Ohio, you may know about this. The former owner of the Center for Choice, which is an abortion clinic there in Toledo, I wanted to give you the names here. I wrote them down, of the centers and organizations that are actually working. This abortion clinic in Toledo has done over 50,000 abortions. It has now been purchased. It is being torn down. And in the community of Toledo, 3 pregnancy help centers, the Bowling Green Pregnancy Center, Heartbeat of Toledo, which was the original pregnancy center here in Ohio that Heartbeat International also came from, and the Pregnancy Center, along with Catholic Charities and the Greater Toledo House of Prayer, are turning this into a park. It's absolutely going to be beautiful. So yay, God. The next slide, please. Okay, Life International in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I love this story. And don't you love the address? I mean, this has always been the address, 72 Ransom Avenue. But this abortion clinic, this local abortionist did over 35,000 abortions in this abortion clinic, which originally was built as a synagogue. It was turned into an evangelical church. The evangelical church closed. The abortionist bought it. For years did abortions there. And eventually, through the prayers of the group Life International, which Heartbeat networks with, which helped start pregnancy centers internationally, purchased the building. It's a long story of everything, the horrible horrors that they found in that building. But Heartbeat gave them a gift for the building, which was a big picture of the divine mercy, you know, with Jesus, with the blood and water. And we gave it to them for their recovery room. The recovery room for the abortion clinic was turned into a beautiful prayer room. So the recovery from the abortion now is a totally different thing, of course. It involves the reconciliation and healing. Last picture up here, please. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You know Dr. Gosnell's clinic? So-called Dr. Gosnell, one of the most notorious abortionists in the United States, eventually convicted of murder. The Alpha Care Pregnancy Center, an affiliate of Heartbeat International, purchased the two. His center is in the middle. They purchased the two buildings on each side. The Alpha Center is now on the left. The Pregnancy Center, bringing life, an adjoining wall with the Gosnell Abortion Clinic. They would like to eventually buy the Gosnell Abortion Clinic. It is still involved in litigation because of all of his debts. But God is turning even abortion clinics into places of life, transforming America. Okay, final slides. I could tell you about these. These are others in Iowa, Miami, Planned Parenthood in Bryan, Texas. We don't have time to talk about all those beautiful stories. Let's look at the next slide. Our own folks that work in pregnancy centers, you know, we are much more likely to be bringing that pro-life values to our work, our schools, our churches, our neighborhoods. We are more likely to be having larger families and become even stronger social and political forces, us folks that are working in the centers. And so God is using us in big ways. Next slide. And last but not least, of course, we are affecting life everlasting. Not only by helping more people to be born who then will be saved and live forever in heaven in all eternity. We are serving in the name of Jesus, modeling Jesus to others, sharing the good news, calling those who would hear to connect with the body of Christ in a closer way, and in everything we do, affirming and modeling biblical values. All right, last slide, I believe. Last but not least, too, Heartbeat is also international. I've talked about what we do in the U.S., but we have pregnancy centers located all over the world in 50 different countries. It's growing all the time. We collaborate with groups of centers in different countries, some of which we have helped to birth. Some of these coalitions, some already existed and joined up with Heartbeat International. So we're doing it all over the world. And finally, I know I said it was the last slide, here's our information. Connect with us, please. Go to our website, heartbeatinternational.org. Put optionline.org in all your materials. Pregnancy Help News, pregnancyhelpnews.com. All the good news that I was sharing with you, you can get it on your computer, just as a news service, free. So if you get life news, life site news, add Pregnancy Help News, pregnancyhelpnews.com. So anyway, it's been wonderful to be with you. I wish I could have been with you for much more time. I know that I've taken up my time and maybe one or two questions, but like our other speakers, I will be here the rest of the day. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Maybe I can answer one.
Maybe you can applaud her first.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, before we ask a question or two here, just know that we are now trending. We were #1 in Cleveland with hashtag Back to Life. So if you've got your stuff, make sure you go do that. So you really got everybody going on the trending. So make sure you continue that. So we were #1. We dropped to #2. Coming up to #1. Hashtag Back to Life. Now also go to SurveyMonkey.com so you can give your comments because it'll take 5 minutes and we want to get those results by tomorrow. For those of you who want to go to Steps of Building a Relationship with Pregnant Women, that's going on probably right now over in room #2. You were talking so much about prayer. Know that everybody should know that people have signed up online to pray for our speakers. So people out there right now across the country are praying for people here. And we have a prayer room right around the corner. And before I ask the question, you've got a book signing right after this.
Yes,
Am I correct in that?
Where is that?
I think it's just right outside the.
Right outside?
Right outside.
Okay.
So you,
if you want more about my story, how I got started, what God's done in my life, and how that really has affected the growth of the pregnancy centers in the last 40 years, that's what my book is about. So if you want to know more about Heartbeat and what God's done, that's the book.
So the big question for everybody here is, you've covered a lot. How are you funded? How can crisis pregnancy centers get money? Where does it? Because it doesn't come. If I'm not mistaken, the government doesn't seem to give us any money.
That's right. Almost all pregnancy centers are 100% privately funded, just like I believe you are here, as well as Cleveland Right to Life. A few states have developed some pots of money. We'd like to see more of that. If the centers want to receive reimbursements for some of their core services, like pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, connecting women with pregnancy needs to resources in the community so they do have healthy babies. Believe me, we are saving the states thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars by the work we do to help women have healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. Some states are beginning to recognize that and have some programs for reimbursement, but it's still a small percentage. Almost all pregnancy centers are privately funded, and as is Heartbeat International. Yeah.